Check 1 2, check 1 2, check 1 2. Welcome to the Stadium Pulse, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, welcome. My name is Tegan Randolph. If it is the first time you are ever seeing this show, we just hit 500 subscribers on the Stadium Pulse. You know what? Just for the sake of argument, nope. He goes for the bit for the third time. Nonetheless, we hit 500 subscribers, and that is such a huge accomplishment. So I do want to say thank you to getting halfway to the goal that I really want to get to, which is 1,000. And so truly, if you are returning or if you're new, maybe you don't know if you're subscribed, go check, because a lot of analytics tell me, and I'm just the messenger here. A lot of analytics tell me that a lot of people watch, but they don't subscribe, and it's completely free. So if you want more college football content, there's a big red button that gives you some more. But we have a monster of a show. As you see on the ticker below, we have some huge topics, some huge seismic events going on in the world of college football. A lot of quarterback news that we need to be talking about. Darian Mensah being one of them. Dante Moore and his decision is a huge one at that. And then we'll talk a little bit about the transfer portal, maybe some final thoughts on the national championship. And by the way, why are we playing the national championship on a Monday? Just call a spade, man. The fact that we are going to be done with the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. And then, oh yeah, by the way, our little dessert on Monday is going to be the national championship, the thing that everyone had been fighting for. How do we get to this point? And then once we get to that point, it kind of feels like almost like a season of television that you have all these great episodes building up to it and they fumble the finale. That's how I feel about the national championship being on a Monday. It feels like it's been so long since we've been watching the semifinals, and now we're going to get to this big moment, and about 95% of the college football world has moved on to the 2026 season. It really does feel like we are having the national championship, or let me do the analogy. It really does feel like we are watching the Super Bowl, but on top of the Super Bowl is the NFL draft, and on top of that is free agency, and then the coaching cycle, all sandwiched together over the next couple of weeks. They have to figure out this college football calendar, because the fact that we have all moved on to the next season, and then we still have the national championship, the thing that everyone is fighting tooth and nail to figure out what format is going to be the best fit for college football. And then when we get to the point, it feels like a dud. It's super frustrating, in my opinion, not to mention it should be played at the Rose Bowl every single season. But speaking of the national championship, or speaking of a team that has to be focused on the future following Monday, the Miami Hurricanes. The Miami Hurricanes may have just figured out their formula to getting elite quarterbacks. And apparently it's waiting to the very last moment. It's kind of like a basketball player who misses 90% of their shots through quarter 1 through 3. And then all of a sudden in the fourth quarter, they catch fire. I don't know how they've done it for 3 straight years. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, Darian Mensah, the quarterback out of Tulane that went to Duke, had a solid year at Duke, had 34 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, about 4,000 total yards, and was a very good quarterback, really caught fire as of late. And he was a quarterback that potentially could have gone to the NFL draft. Now, Darian Mensah went through almost like a LeBron James announcement on his Instagram that he would be returning to Duke. None of that matters until the door closes on the transfer portal. No one is safe. And I mean, no one is safe until the end of this Friday when you are watching this, if it's live. No one is safe in the transfer portal until it is fully closed. Now, we had heard for about 24 to 48 hours that Darian Mensah was thinking about going into the transfer portal. And in the world of college football, when there's smoke, there's fire. And the truth is, we got the result of Darian Mensah entering. And this is going to be Miami's game. Originally, I had predicted that Ty Simpson was going to be the next quarterback. And technically, in the result, I was wrong. But that's not to say that there wasn't an offer on the table. $6.5 million apparently was almost going to get matched. I believe it was either Ole Miss or Tennessee was going to be able to match that. But they are going to shell out money to go get a quarterback. And it sounds like Darian Mensah is going to be the guy. And there's so much to break down and talk about with this. I mean, in the last minute, I had to change the thumbnail of today's show to fit this topic in because of the magnitude of it. And so the impact of Darian Mensah being a Miami Hurricane, because that hasn't really been signed, sealed, delivered, but truly there is a reason why he went into the portal, and it was because of tampering, because they allocated the money that they were going to give to Ty Simpson, more than likely to entice a Mensah to enter the portal at the last moment. First things first, the fact that Miami is able to get a guy at the very last moment, right before the portal closes. And then we go back a couple years to Carson Beck and Cam Ward. Both were players that had entered the NFL draft, and then they ended up becoming Miami Hurricanes via the transfer portal. It's remarkable. It is one of the more impressive things in the sport, because truly they are dancing on the line of not really having a plan with the quarterback position. Now, this year is a little bit unique because they are competing for a national championship, whereas years prior, they weren't in the college football playoff, and they had all the time to put all their resources and focus on what can we do to get better, what can we do to get to the national championship, and yet they stick to their process of waiting till the very last moment, and it continues to pay off for him, because Darian Mensah as a talent, if he's able to put all the pieces together, which he started to do in this season, he is going to be a top 5 quarterback in college football. He's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the entire country overall. He could have a case to be the best. That's the type of talent that Darian Mensah is. And if he has the development of a Shannon Dawson, if he has the development and situation around him that Miami is going to be able to build with Malachi Toney, and they rumored to potentially have Jordan Seaton enter the conversation, and Jordan Seaton being the top tackle in the transfer portal right now because they continue to shell out money. Darian Mensah is such an incredible grab for them, truly. And Miami isn't going anywhere. They're just not going to go anywhere with the money that they're able to shell out, like a Texas Tech, like an A&M, like a Texas. If you have money to spend, you're going to be able to get talent in the door. Then it just becomes a question, do you trust the coaching? And for a long time, I didn't trust Mario Cristobal, and I don't think a lot of people had fair reason to trust him. Now I do, especially with the offensive and defensive coordinator tandem that they have. They're about to be playing in a national championship, and they could be reloading all of a sudden with Darian Mensah, more than likely going to Coral Gables and being a Miami Hurricane. That is such a crazy trend of them just waiting and waiting and waiting and then pulling the trigger at the very last minute. It's remarkable. Like, there's no other way to say it. And I think this team is going to be so damn good. So damn good. But nonetheless, we still have all the other things that are going on in college football to be talking about. And if you want to throw in your thoughts about Darian Mensah or any questions, I would love to hear them. By the way, if you hear like On3 or like ESPN try to throw out maybe Tennessee, who I don't know what they're going to do at the quarterback position. They are banking on the fact that Joey Aguilar could get another year, and that's not something I would bank on. What in the world is Tennessee going to do at the quarterback position? Because they've been named to be linked to Mensah, but I don't think they're going to be able to match whatever offer that Miami is going to be able to put down. This is Miami is the early favorite, and it's going to be Miami until it's not. And so I'm just going to act like Darian Mensah is a Miami Hurricane. I understand that is very risky. That is irresponsible of me to do, but there is a reason why he entered the portal at the very last minute, and there is a reason why the Miami Hurricanes have been linked to him from the very start. Right when there was smoke, they've been the team, and right as he's entered, they've been the team. But we have to talk about Dante Moore. Dante Moore, the quarterback out of Oregon, had a huge decision in between the Tuesday show that we had into Friday. I bumped it a little bit. Traditionally, we try to do Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday because that fits the college football season a little bit better. But with the national championship being on a Monday, which is stupid, we've already talked about that, I thought I would bump it a little bit because we're going to have to react on Tuesday. So we may not do the 3 shows. I don't know. I'm going to figure it out. It's also a long weekend. I got some family in town, so got to figure that out. But nonetheless, Dante Moore staying at Oregon. Let's talk about it. Dante Moore made the massive decision to stay at Oregon. Now, once there was the announcement, or at least the framing of the announcement that he's going to go on ESPN, he's going to make it a big show, I knew instantly he was staying at Oregon. Because you would become public enemy number 1 in Eugene if you had made this big, grand moment that you were going to make the decision like your LeBron James, all to go to the NFL draft. Just post a graphic. That's all you have to do. If you want to go to the NFL draft, no one would blame you. No one would have, batted an eye. Would they be disappointed? Probably not, actually, because they got Dylan Raiola. So if Dante Moore wanted to go to the NFL draft, he could have easily just hit up, hey, Hayes Fawcett, can you make me a little graphic? All right, cool. And I'm going to post it on Instagram, and then I'm going to move forward with my life. But the moment that he said he was going to make an announcement on ESPN, I knew he was returning to school. And there's so many questions we got to talk about. Was this a good move for Dante Moore to return to school? I think it was. I think this is a guy that needs development, but that's not to say it wasn't a risky move. I completely understand you have a ton of NFL draft nerds and old vets trying to say, you go make the money when you got it, because frankly, he was going to be a lock top 5 pick. There's been some conspiracy theories on whether or not he may have been a little bit higher on the public perception, but in the internal circles with the NFL, he probably wasn't going to be a top 5 pick. I'm calling their bluff on that. I truly do believe by the time we get to April, whether it was going to be the Cardinals, whether it was going to be the Jets, someone was going to pick Dante Moore if he was going to be available. We're talking about a 20-year-old has all the tools and everything you are looking for in a top-end quarterback. Now, has he produced like that? It's to be seen. It's been a rocky road. He had a very solid 2025, but that doesn't mean he was a perfect quarterback prospect. There was a lot of holes in his games, but you could really bank on the fact of A, potential, and B, the fact that he's only 20 freaking years old. So there is a big risk that he is taking on, because I do think he would have easily been a top 5 pick in this upcoming NFL draft. But what he did do is allow for him to develop, because we have seen Dante Moore take the path of the less taken, or the path that doesn't get, what's the word? What is it? the less beaten path. We've seen Dante Moore, pardon me, let me get adjusted. We've seen Dante Moore take the path. I'm going to try one more time. We have seen Dante Moore take the path that has been less taken. I'm giving up on it. We've seen Dante Moore time and time again pick a path that not many will choose. We're talking about a guy that went from UCLA to Oregon and sat himself on the bench. You don't see that in college football many times. Now we're seeing Dylan Raiola, funny enough, take the similar effect where he's going to plant himself on the bench at Eugene and really let him develop, and we'll talk about that as well. But what we're seeing with Dante Moore is not something you traditionally see. And so with him returning, there shouldn't be a shock or a surprise. But what we should be talking about is the impact, because this changes the trajectory for both him and Oregon, frankly, who is getting continuity at the quarterback position. When we look at Dante Moore's perspective, as he's now going to more than likely place himself in the 2027 draft class, he is entering a class that is going to be very competitive at his position compared to what we saw in 2026, where frankly, it's Mendoza. And then we were talking Ty Simpson, Garrett Nussmeier, quarterbacks that Dante Moore, for all intents and purposes, outside of Fernando Mendoza, he was easily going to be the quarterback 2 in this upcoming class. Even if it was meaning that he would be like a top 20 pick versus top 5, maybe those rumors were true, that maybe the internal circles were a little bit lower compared to the public perception. Regardless, he was going to be a lock first round pick, and more than likely an early one at that. But when we flip the page to 2027, not only is it going to be something where he has more tape than most of the quarterbacks that are going to be available, which then we're shifting the perspective from what he could be to what we are actually seeing. And he's going to be 21 years old. He's going to be a little bit older, and you're risking injury. Not only that, you're looking at Arch Manning. You're looking at DJ Lagway. You're looking at John Mateer. You're looking at Lenora Sellers. You're looking at Sam Levitt, Nico Iamaleava, and many, many others who have all been projected in a loaded 2027 draft class. Even if you go through and nitpick each of these names on this list, you can throw in guys like Jeremiah Smith. You can throw in so many other non-quarterbacks that are going to be top-end guys, Colin Simmons, Dylan Stewart, and many, many others that are going to crowd that top 5, top 10 pick area. That's not to say a guy like Dante Moore couldn't be a top 5 pick in the 2027 draft class. The road is going to be a lot more difficult, but he has the ceiling to do it. Now it's a betting on yourself moment where I'm sure he's going to get a hefty pay from Oregon. He wouldn't be making this decision if there wasn't a sizable NIL deal in front of him. But nonetheless, it is a big risk because there's so much more guaranteed money with the NFL. When we look at the perspective for Oregon, this is a slam dunk. You could not have asked for a better situation if you're Oregon, because now you have continuity at the quarterback position. You're going to have Evan Stewart, a wide receiver that had been injured for the majority of the year. Most of the people that have watched college football forgot about Evan Stewart and the talent that he is. Then you're going to have an elite tight end. You're going to have an elite talent around him, and you're going to be more than set up to go on a national championship run. Frankly, it's going to be Notre Dame, Oregon, and Texas, who all project to be massive favorites when we're talking about the national championship in 2026. In Oregon, you now have not only your quarterback of the future, so you don't have to worry about going into next transfer cycle saying, what quarterback are we going to get this time? Because you have Dylan Raiola, who's your projected future starter, but now you have another year of Dante Moore, who, like I've mentioned many, many times, has top 5 upside, and he has the talent to be one of, if not the best quarterback in the entire country. This just checks another box, and you're preparing for the future. So credit to Dan Lanning, who I have been a little bit critical of on this page. This is phenomenal work. They continue to be able to have perfect alignment on the offensive side of the ball, even with the coordinator changes, which I think is very remarkable. Like, that is so impressive to see. Even while everything is externally changing, you're keeping continuity within the roster, which is a rarity in this sport. So Oregon checks the box. If anyone is doubting whether or not Raiola is going to go to Oregon, he would have entered the portal immediately. He would not have committed to Oregon before Dante Moore's decision. So if there's anyone doubting whether or not Dylan Raiola is still going to go to the portal, he's going to be a distraction, XYZ. I'm not the biggest guy on like Dylan Raiola as a talent, but he can be a very good quarterback if he develops, but the road to getting there is quite long. So shout out to him for being able to bench himself for a little bit and really soak in all the information, because I think he really needs to speed up his processing and speed everything up about his game. And he's going to have every opportunity to do so at Eugene. So, or Oregon, better said. So this is wild news in a sense of the impact, but it's not very shocking to see Dante return to school. It is going to set up Oregon, and this will probably be the title of the video. Oregon is now going to be national championship favorites with Dante Moore returning, right there with Texas, right there with Notre Dame, because of the quarterback that he is. And this is huge news for Oregon. Let me get a sip of some energy. All right. 500 subs, guys. Got 500 subs. That's awesome. That's fantastic news. I just like right as I am clicking record or go live, we hit 500. That's incredible. That's so incredible. When talking about the transfer portal, you have to start with the winners. There's always winners in the transfer portal, but unfortunately, there's also losers. There are teams that didn't do enough in the portal. There's teams that may have gotten and overpaid for prospects. And unfortunately, I have to talk about some teams or a clump of teams that are losers in the transfer portal. If someone was to ask me who is the biggest loser of the transfer portal, I would give them a cop-out answer. And that cop-out answer being any team that got poached for their head coach. if you go look at what is left behind by some of these coaches that may go to a better school, maybe a better conference. I think of North Texas to Oklahoma State with Eric Morris. We detailed that Eric Morris was one of the biggest winners of the transfer portal. Unfortunately for North Texas, they got gutted. They are left with nothing. Their general manager, head coach, quarterback, running back, wide receivers, and many, many others all enter the portal, more than likely going to Stillwater. The joke and the meme nowadays is the fact that North Texas basically is just Oklahoma State. And the same could be said for South Florida to Auburn. But at least with South Florida, they lost their quarterback. That was to be expected. Some running backs, some wide receivers. But they were able to rebound a little bit better than what we saw with North Texas. But to stick with the same example, I mean, we could talk about Utah. Utah late into the cycle lost their head coach in Kyle Whittingham. That's a brutal loss just based on the timing of it. Michigan lost their head coach very early into the transfer portal cycle, but that was right as it was happening. All of these coaching moves happened in early December, whereas right before we were entering the portal, Michigan's panicking. What are we going to do? Now we're in the portal, and Utah got gutted for all their talent. This leaves these teams in really, really difficult positions. And frankly, I would do the same thing if I'm these coaches. I know that these players work in my system, and now I'm just trading spots into a new location, potentially a better situation in terms of facilities and resources and coaching across the board. I would do the same thing. Everyone talks about Deion Sanders and saying, yeah, I'm taking my bags and it's Louis. Every coach does it. Every single coach is taking all the prospects and transfers and players all to their next destination. And the same could be said for Penn State and Iowa State. Now, luckily for Penn State, they poached from Iowa State. So all of their players went to Penn State because Penn State got gutted by Virginia Tech because James Franklin went to Virginia Tech. And unfortunately, the loser in this race is Iowa State. Now, do I think that they rebounded quite well in the portal for what their class is? Of course, but they still got gutted, guys. These teams just got fried in the transfer portal, and it's unfortunate. These are the biggest losers, in my opinion, and it happens every single cycle. Now, you can make an argument that maybe we should implement some sort of rule that the group of five should get payment or reimbursement for getting poached by the Power Four, but it's not really just in these one-offs that we're talking about. Like, for example, Cam Cook from Jacksonville State going to, I forget, maybe it wasn't Missouri, but wherever he went in the Power Four, that Jacksonville State should get some money back in terms of NIL. This is a massive wave of prospects and teams that are just getting gutted by whichever coach gets poached. So I would classify those guys as the biggest losers of the transfer portal. But if we were to give a specific team, Alabama does come to mind as one of the bigger portal losses. And it's not for a fact of they didn't add talent. I don't think that they had an outright bad class. I don't think it was good enough for what are the expectations going into 2026 for Alabama. And those expectations are quite high, even though we're talking about a team coming off of a college football playoff appearance, almost made it in the first year of Kalen DeBoer. But to call a spade, that's not the expectation for Alabama. And I wonder, and I've talked about this time and time again, what are the expectations for the people that control the fate of Kalen DeBoer? Are they still going to have the crimson-colored glasses of what their past was in the 2010s with Nick Saban and it was national championships? Those are the questions I'm asking, because if that's the case, this could be a make or break season for Kalen DeBoer. And if that's the case, this is not the transfer portal class that you needed. Number one, losing Hollywood Smothers was a massive loss. That was a brutal loss. I think Hollywood Smothers might be the best running back in the portal, and he's one of the best running backs in the country, bare minimum. And he flipped to Texas while he was enrolled at Alabama. Then you entered the Cam Coleman sweepstakes pretty late into it, but you were a real competitor and you lose to Texas. And I look at this team and I say, all right, you did have the ability to retain Austin Mack and Keelan Russell. That's great. So your quarterbacks project to be pretty solid, or very inexperienced, but have the talent and an upside to be very solid in a quarterback battle. But you're missing your running back one. You're missing a couple of wide receivers. your offensive line, a couple of your defensive linemen. You're missing a ton of pieces from this team. Now, I think your secondary is going to be fantastic, and that's not to say I'm predicting that Alabama goes 6-6. I'm predicting Alabama to be a very good team like they have been. But I think this is a team that needs to be great. I think this is a team, though, that they made it to the SEC championship, their fan base and maybe the decision makers are not satisfied. And if that's the case, I don't know if this was the class that really elevates them. Now, I will give them credit where it's due, because I think the number one thing that people have been rebuttaling with has been Alabama has a very good high school recruiting class. I don't deny that. I think Alabama has a top 2 recruiting class this past cycle. But if you are banking on true freshmen in 2025 and 2026 to fix your entire roster, that helps you in the long term. That's the baseline of any given program and any elite program. But in a make or break year, you do not want to rely on that. And that's what the red flags start to pop up for me, especially as other teams in the SEC, like in LSU, Georgia, Texas A&M, and many others continue to reload. And I see Alabama really not being as competitive in the NIL space as maybe they want to be, which has been something that Nick Saban for years has spoken very loud about, that not a lot of people are really listening. I also want to note that Alabama was 50th. I forgot I wrote down that note. Alabama's 50th in the transfer portal right now. That's crazy to think about. Lastly, the 49th team. I think Washington is a loser in the transfer portal for 2 main reasons. Number one, they didn't really do much in acquiring talent. They had lost a lot of guys, and they really didn't elevate this roster. And I think a lot of people still have the Pac-12 lenses on Washington and not really realizing this is a team in the Big Ten. This is a team that is a very good quarterback. I think a very good coach that was potentially contending for the Michigan job. I think there's a lot of great pieces, one of the most underrated home environments in the entire country. And the question really begins where we're starting to ask, what can Washington do to get back to the Kalen DeBoer level? This was a team in the national championship, ladies and gentlemen. I understand you had Michael Penix, you had all the wide receivers, all these different pieces, and then you lose Kalen DeBoer, you lose all those pieces. You kind of feel like the TCU team that got to the mountaintop but can't really get back up there. And I don't see that for a Washington team. I see a lot of opportunity and a lot of momentum that could be there, but they fumbled the transfer portal. And it goes to the second thing. The fact that Damon Williams tried to enter the portal set you back. I think it set back a ton of momentum for this program, because Damon Williams, I think, is a very fun quarterback. Do I think he is an NFL draft prospect? Probably not, but he is a very good college quarterback. And the fact that he tried to leave that program, and he's supposed to be the leader, he's supposed to be the identity of this team that is going to be losing David Boston, that's going to be losing Jonah Coleman. And now you're going to have to really rebuild this offense with a leader that tried to leave you. This is rough. That is a rough position to be in. He is going to have the entire summer and spring to really try to rebuild that character, but it is not a good look knowing that you took the cheese on the rat trap and you really fell for it, and it was in front of the public eye. You have Washington players that are more than likely not going to trust you, and if that distrust is already at the core of the team, I may have to be out on Washington. As much as I want to believe in this team, and I think that they very well could be a powerhouse within the Big Ten, something like that is when we get like 12 months down the line and we're looking back and Washington is 7-5, 6-6, we can point to that moment and really say that's where that distrust really started. And we really started to see the snowball come down the mountain, and it wasn't a good look for the team, which is unfortunate. Like I said, I think this team could be very good. They're just not there yet, unfortunately. And that would be the top 3, I would say, biggest losers. Recapping it for you, the number 1 loser is any team that got poached at the head coach position, because they got basically mugged for all the talent that was left within the team and kind of left scrambling to try to create any kind of talent. Number 2 would be Alabama, who is ranked 50th right now in the transfer portal. And with the expectations, they need a better portal class and a more impactful one, in my opinion, before they go into the 2026 team. Then we go into Washington, which maybe didn't have the most thrilling transfer portal overall, but then your leader, your identity, tried to enter the portal, and now you're having all this noise around the locker room, and it's on Jedd Fisch and honestly Damon Williams to repair it. So those would be the 3 biggest losers, I think, of the transfer portal. Unfortunately, I know it's negative, but with every winner, there's a loser, so we have to talk about it. We're at 30 minutes. We're almost done with the show. I have some final thoughts on the national championship before we wrap everything up. Y'all fine with that? Everyone fine? All right, let's do it. This is the path for an upset for the Miami Hurricanes. I have a little checklist of what the Miami Hurricanes have to do if they want to win this game. I mean, we're talking about a 7.5 point favorite here. I understand we want to have the conversation of Miami and the defensive line and how they're going to overwhelm with their size and all these different things. And that's been the same thing we've been talking about with Indiana in terms of talent rosters comparing to the Alabamas and the Oregon of the world. What are we going to be able to see from Miami that's going to be different from those blowouts? The first thing I got to say that Miami has to do in this game is run the ball effectively. If we get into the third and fourth quarter and you are just getting slammed into a wall every single time you try to run the football, it's like 2.2 yards per carry and you move away from it. Shannon Dawson basically abandons the run, which we haven't seen him do in the college football playoff, but because they've been so successful in it. But nonetheless, if you start running into that issue, and you're starting to put pressure on Carson Beck to basically carry the offense or Malachi Toney trick plays, I think you're cooked from the start. So you're going to need Mark Fletcher. You're going to be able to need to see this team run for over 100 yards because right now I believe their line is set at like 95. If you go over that, that's the first box being checked. The second one being pressure Mendoza consistently. We've seen in the early spots of these college football playoffs as Indiana's kind of feeling out the game. We've seen Mendoza get pressured time and time again when they send extra guys. Can you pressure Mendoza not only for all four quarters, but can you pressure Mendoza by just sending 4, just sending 5? And especially when we talk about Mesidor and we talk about Bain, who are going to present a unique challenge for Miami, are they going to be able to find wins consistently through the game? Because if they're not able to, and you're letting Mendoza get comfortable, especially if you finally get him into a third and long and Mendoza's just able to dot up to an Omar Cooper, to a Surratt, you're cooked from the start. I would say those top two are necessities. You have to hit those top two. You have to be able to run the football effectively, and you have to be able to get to Mendoza, which is pretty simple, right? Get to the quarterback on the other side of the ball and run the football. That's pretty simple. Easier said than done. And the last thing is you need 2 to 3 plays. Now, I'm not just saying like, oh, you just need to make these plays. No, I'm talking about the plays that if we are putting in the CD of the Miami Hurricanes winning the national championship and they're going through the highlights and, oh my God, we just saw Carson Beck scramble and we're turning to the national championship and we're watching the highlights of the game, what kind of plays can we see from Carson Beck? What plays can we see maybe from a CJ Daniels? What plays can we see from Mark Fletcher? What plays can we see from Malachi Toney that would be in that CD before they start raising up the national championship trophy and the banner that follows it? What kind of plays can be made? And I'm talking about 2 to 3. It can't just be one, because if we're in the fourth quarter, it's a dogfight. You need a couple of those plays that can really break and make the difference for Miami to win this game. Because frankly, I don't think this is going to happen. I don't think Miami's going to win this football game. I'm doubling and tripling down on this. Every single time we try to think of the avenue and the path for the team to finally beat Indiana, the freight train that continues to dominate, I just see so many other paths for Indiana to win this game. They can win in a blowout. You can put them in a telephone booth and make it a rock fight. It does not matter. Curt Cignetti is the better coach in this spot. Fernando Mendoza is the better quarterback. They have the better offensive scheme. And defensively, I think Miami does have the edge, and that is the one path, like I'm Doctor Strange, for them to win. But honestly, to keep going with the movie references, I see Miami as like Ivan Drago. And unless you really believe that all of a sudden Miami is Rocky Balboa, that they can just continue to fight and claw, and their play style does resemble it, and we're in the fourth quarter and they're keeping it close, who knows? You never know what happens in one quarter of football with the game on the line. But I don't see that happening. I don't see that Indiana's just going to blow them out by 3 touchdowns, but I think the control of the game really is going to be into Indiana's favor, because what Miami does is shoot themselves in the foot. Regardless on whether or not you want to believe that Miami has enough playmakers, because they do, whether or not you believe in Carson Beck, what the problem's going to come down to is if Miami is penalized, if Miami doesn't capitalize, and if Miami continues to shoot themselves in the foot like we saw against Ole Miss, that's going to lose them this game. To be fair, Miami's best can win this national championship. Call a spade a spade. The best version of this program, the best version of this team can win the game. I heard Josh Pate talked about this. It's whether or not you believe that they can play their best version against Indiana. And this is a team that has been able to get the worst out of most teams, unless we're talking about like Penn State. And I have full faith that we're going to see the best version of Indiana as they continue to climb the ladder. Each rung just gets a little bit easier and they play a little bit better. And I just see Miami not winning this football game. And I see Indiana and Curt Cignetti hoisting the trophy. And it's not a Cinderella run. It's a sign of a potential dynasty. With that being said, I don't know where that accent came from. With that being said, live from Nashville, thank you so much for watching the Stadium Pulse. My name is Tegan Randolph. We just hit 500 subs, which is so cool. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for a national championship recap. We may do another show over the weekend. Not 100% sure, but definitely on Tuesday, recapping the national championship. And we will be entering the off season. Such a scary thought. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys next time. If I could find the video to outro. I will see you guys next time. Peace.